A cold, unseasonable rain poured down on the streets of Maplewood, a small town in Ohio. Margaret Reed gazed at her reflection in the window of her bookstore. Pages passed, as she adjusted her hair. Her eyes still held the sparkle of her youth, but since the tragedy 4 years ago, there was always a shadow lurking behind them. "I'll be closing up early this afternoon," Margaret told Eliza, her only employee. "I have to prepare for my sister's wedding." Eliza smiled as she dusted off an old book. "As her big sister, you must be so proud." Margaret returned only a vague smile. Proud, was that how she should feel? She knew she should be happy that Vanessa was getting married. But when she learned that the groom was Ryan Foster, her heart filled with complex emotions. Ryan Foster was the son of a prominent Maplewood family, heir to the town's wealthiest real estate developer. And after her son Jake died, he had become a regular at her bookstore. Vanessa knew nothing about the friendship that had developed between Margaret and Ryan. As Margaret hurried home through the rain, her mother's words echoed in her mind. "You're the family disgrace." Karen's voice was cold and sharp, even over the phone. "I don't want you to meet Vanessa's fiancé's family. A single mother, and with your son." Her mother's voice trailed off, filled with unspeakable contempt. Margaret took a deep breath as she reached the porch of her home. Before opening the front door, she looked at the photo of Jake on her smartphone screen. His innocent smile gave her strength to get through this day. "I'm home," she called as she entered the living room. Her parents were already dressed formally, sitting on the sofa. Her mother Karen wore what looked like an expensive pearl necklace, while her father Thomas appeared tense in his black tuxedo. "Finally, you're back," Karen said, checking her watch. "We leave in an hour." Vanessa has already started getting ready at the venue. Thomas's demeanor reflected the steadfastness he had developed over years of running a construction company. "Margaret, please don't cause any problems today." "Problems? What do you mean?" Margaret asked quietly. "I'm just attending my sister's wedding." "About your situation?" Karen answered, carefully choosing her words. "The Fosters are the most respected family in town. Ryan's father is the president of the golf club, and his mother heads a charity organization. What are we supposed to say if they ask about you?" Margaret gave a bitter smile. "Why not tell the truth? That I run a bookstore and lost my son in a car accident 4 years ago." Silence fell over the room. Thomas lowered his eyes to his newspaper, and Karen pursed her lips. Neither of them wanted to talk about the death of their grandson. It had become a forbidden topic in the family. Margaret went upstairs and began to change in her room. As she put on her dress, she looked out the window. The rain had stopped, and the sun was beginning to show. Ironically, the weather, at least, promised to be perfect for a wedding. Standing in front of the mirror after finishing her makeup, Margaret picked up a small box from her nightstand. Inside was a picture book that Jake had loved most. A gift for Ryan. She hesitated whether she should give it to him on her sister's wedding day, but she knew that Ryan had a special attachment to this book. Jake and Ryan's nephew had been classmates, and they had loved the same story. The doorbell rang, and Margaret started. Before leaving her room, she gave a small nod to herself in the mirror. Today was her sister's special day. She would set aside her pain and family conflicts and celebrate Vanessa's happiness, she promised herself. "Margaret, hurry up," her father's voice echoed from downstairs. "We're leaving." Taking a deep breath, Margaret started down the stairs. The clock showed noon, and the Reed family car was driving towards the outskirts of Maplewood. A heavy silence filled the car, and Margaret, gazing at the passing scenery through the window, felt that her presence was unwanted by her family. "We'll reach the venue in an hour," Karen said from the passenger seat. Her hairstyle was perfectly arranged, her expensive dress impeccably beautiful without a single wrinkle. Until then, let's avoid conversation as much as possible. Especially when the foster family is around. Margaret held back a sigh. I understand, Mother. I'll pretend to be invisible. Thomas in the driver's seat cleared his throat irritably. There's no need for sarcasm. Let's work together as a family today. As a family, those words stabbed Margaret's heart. Since Jake died, she had never truly felt like a member of the family. Even at the funeral 4 years ago, her parents had merely attended as a formality, never sharing in her grief. To them, Jake's death was simply an unfortunate incident that damaged their social standing. We're low on gas, Karen pointed at the dashboard. Let's stop at the next gas station. Shortly after, they arrived at a large gas station along the highway. While Thomas was filling up, Karen took out her smartphone and began checking messages. I heard from Vanessa, she said excitedly. The foster family relatives are already gathering at the venue. Even the state governor is there. Margaret looked out the window. The wind was picking up, slightly ruffling the skirt of her dress. Mom, I'm going to use the restroom. Karen looked up, hesitated briefly, then nodded. Be quick. We're leaving soon. Margaret got out of the car and headed to the restroom inside the gas station. She fixed her makeup and took deep breaths to calm herself. Her reflection in the mirror looked tense and tired. It's okay, just a few more hours, she reassured herself. After leaving the restroom, she stopped by the small convenience store section and bought a bottle of mineral water. After quenching her thirst, she returned to where the car had been parked. But the car wasn't there. At first, Margaret thought she had gone to the wrong spot. She looked around the parking lot, but the Reed's black sedan was nowhere to be seen. They must have moved to another spot, she whispered to herself. But scanning the entire gas station, she couldn't find her parents anywhere. Margaret took out her cell phone and called her father's number. After several rings, it went to voicemail. She tried her mother's number next, with the same result. Is this some kind of joke? She looked around. The wind was getting stronger, rustling her dress and disheveling her carefully arranged hair. Just then, her smartphone vibrated. The screen displayed a message from Vanessa. I'm the only star today. Margaret couldn't believe her eyes. Then a message from her mother arrived. Now we're all family. She clutched her phone in disbelief. They had really left her behind. Deliberately. Margaret tried calling again with trembling hands, but no one answered. Various emotions washed over her: anger, sadness, a sense of betrayal. But the strongest was the painful realization of how worthless she was to the Reed family. The venue was about 50 miles away. Thinking she could make it in time by calling a taxi, she searched for her wallet, only to realize her handbag was gone. Yes, she had left it on the back seat of the car. She had no cash, no credit cards, not even her driver's license. This can't be happening. Margaret sat down on a chair at the gas station, utterly at a loss. A cold wind blew around her. Time passed. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 3. Margaret explained her situation to the gas station attendant and tried to negotiate borrowing a phone, but was told that store policy prohibited lending personal phones. As despair began to envelop her, a thought suddenly occurred to her. Ryan. She remembered his number. After Jake died, he had visited her bookstore almost weekly, talking with her. Sometimes about grief, sometimes about books, and sometimes about ordinary everyday things. Margaret felt embarrassed and hesitant, but she had no other choice. She used borrowed bills from the attendant to make a call from a payphone and dialed Ryan's number. Hello? Ryan's voice sounded calm, yet slightly tense. Ryan, it's Margaret, she felt her voice trembling. I'm really sorry, but I'm in trouble. Margaret? What's wrong? Haven't you arrived at the venue yet? Well, she hesitated about how to explain. My family, they left me behind. I'm at the Shell gas station along Highway 12. My wallet's in the car, so I can't even call a taxi. There was a moment of silence on the other end. They did what? Ryan's voice suddenly sharpened. Left you behind? On purpose. I got a message. They thought it would be better if I wasn't there. After another silence, Ryan's voice returned, now filled with anger. Don't move. I'm coming right now. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Margaret uttered words of thanks, but Ryan had already hung up. She sat on a bench next to the payphone and waited. In the distance, dark clouds were approaching, changing shape. Margaret never imagined her life would become so lonely. Jake's smile flashed in her mind, and she quietly shed tears. When a silver sports car glided into the gas station, Margaret had been waiting for over 30 minutes. Ryan's expression as he stepped out of the car was filled with more anger than she had ever seen. His normally calm, smiling face now bore the mark of deep rage. Margaret. He rushed over and placed his hands on her shoulders. Are you all right? Margaret smiled weakly. Thank you, Ryan. For coming all this way. What are you talking about? It's only natural, he looked around. I can't believe this happened. They got into the car and headed toward the venue. The car was filled with a heavy silence, but it was completely different from the silence she had experienced with her family earlier. Ryan's anger was too deep for words, and Margaret wondered if she should try to calm him down. Please don't say anything to Vanessa, she finally said quietly. Today is her special day. Ryan gripped the steering wheel tightly with one hand. She was involved too, wasn't she? You said she sent you a message. Yes, but... Margaret gazed out the window. My relationship with my sister is complicated. Vanessa might just be strongly influenced by our parents' values. That's no excuse, Ryan's voice was cold. I love Vanessa. That's why I can't believe she would participate in something so cruel. Margaret studied Ryan's profile. His strong jawline, determined eyes, the way he faced forward with confidence. He had been her support after Jake died. He visited her bookstore, sometimes staying after closing to talk with her. Maybe her guilt was why she never told her sister about their relationship. Ryan, actually. Margaret said in a small voice. I brought a present for you. He glanced at her for a moment. A present. Margaret pulled out a small paper bag. Miraculously, it was the only thing she had carried with her when she went to the restroom. It's a memento of Jake. The picture book he loved most. The one your nephew liked too. Ryan's expression softened. When they stopped at a red light at the next intersection, he took the bag and pulled out the book. The Boy Who Counted Stars, an old picture book, but beautifully preserved. I remember. His voice trembled. Jake and my nephew Michael used to read this together. They were in the same class, Margaret smiled. Both loved astronomy. Ryan turned the pages and found Jake's name written on the first page. Underneath, in childish handwriting, it said, Stars are my friends. Margaret. Ryan was at a loss for words. Thank you so much. You're important to me, Ryan, she said quietly. So please don't ruin the wedding over what happened today. I'll be fine. Ryan carefully put the book back in its bag and resumed driving. No, you're not fine. And neither am I. This isn't just a mean prank. This is... He searched for words. This is something that can't be forgiven as a human being. When they arrived at the venue, many luxury cars were parked in the lot. Margaret spotted the Reed family car. Her chest tightened. The entrance to the venue was beautifully decorated with flowers, and elegant music was playing. As they opened the door, they were immediately greeted by the venue coordinator. Mr. Foster. A young woman rushed over. Everyone's waiting. The ceremony begins in 30 minutes. Thank you, Jessica, Ryan answered in a composed voice. This is Margaret Reed, the bride's sister. A momentary look of confusion crossed the coordinator's face. Oh, yes. Ms. Reed. Actually. Is there a problem? Ryan's voice lowered. No, just. Jessica seemed to be choosing her words. The bride's family is already seated. They said. What did they say? Ryan's voice grew colder. Jessica apologetically replied, I was told Ms. Margaret wouldn't be coming. The family seating arrangement is. It's fine, Margaret smiled, touching her arm. I can sit somewhere in the back. No, Ryan's voice was resolute. Margaret is family. She sits in the front row. When they entered the venue, many guests had already gathered. The hall, decorated with luxurious ornaments and flowers, was truly fairy tale beautiful. Margaret spotted the Reed family. Her parents were seated in the front row, apparently enjoying conversation with those around them. Ryan took Margaret's hand and led her toward where her parents were sitting. When Karen and Thomas noticed the two of them, their expressions changed to a mixture of fear and surprise. Ryan. Karen stood up, forcing a smile. It's bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the ceremony. Yes, Karen, Ryan's voice was cold as ice. But what's in front of me right now is not the bride, but the daughter you deliberately abandoned. A corner of the venue fell silent. Thomas cleared his throat uncomfortably. What are you talking about, Ryan? He lowered his voice to avoid being overheard. Margaret, of her own will. Please don't lie, Ryan's words were like sharp blades, though he kept his voice down. I picked up Margaret from the gas station. I know about the messages she received. Just then, Vanessa appeared from another room. She was wrapped in a pure white wedding dress, truly as beautiful as a fairy tale princess. However, her expression clearly showed distress at the sight of her fiancé standing next to her sister. Ryan, her voice mixed surprise and fear. Why, with Margaret? Ryan slowly approached Vanessa. But before he reached her, a voice rose from the reception desk. We've been waiting, the receptionist said loudly. The groom, Mr. Ryan, is extremely angry. He has instructed us to cancel everything, saying, if Margaret doesn't come, there will be no wedding. The venue staff is on standby. A wave of shock spread through the venue. Guests looked at each other, and small whispers began to circulate. Members of the Foster family also stood up, clearly confused. What is the meaning of this? James Foster, Ryan's father, approached. He was a dignified man with a strong jawline similar to his son's. Margaret stood frozen in embarrassment and confusion. This was not what she had wanted. But Ryan stood unwavering in the center of the venue. Everyone, he began addressing the guests. Today, I came to marry Vanessa. I love her. But marriage isn't just about two people. It also means connecting with family. He looked toward Margaret. For 4 years, Margaret has been my support. Her son Jake was in the same class as my nephew and was his best friend. After she lost him, her bookstore became my second home. The venue was completely silent. Vanessa's face had turned pale, and Karen looked like she might collapse into her chair. And today, her family deliberately left her at a gas station. without a wallet or phone. Why? Because she's the family disgrace. Thomas tried to speak, but Ryan continued. I declare that I will reconsider marriage with a family that cannot respect Margaret. She is not someone's disgrace, but a strong, caring, wonderful woman. I cannot accept values that deny her existence. Vanessa stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Ryan, please. Her voice trembled. This is a misunderstanding. Margaret stepped forward and took her sister's hand. Vanessa, we need to talk. Right now, here, she said in a quiet but firm voice. And Ryan, you too. Jessica immediately guided the three to a small private room. Once inside, Vanessa took a tissue with trembling hands, desperately trying to fix her makeup that was on the verge of collapse. You've ruined everything, she said bitterly. Happy now? Margaret was hurt by her sister's words but kept her expression unchanged. Vanessa, I'm not trying to ruin anything. Rather, I'm trying to save your wedding. Save it. Vanessa gave a sarcastic smile. By showing up with the groom and exposing such embarrassing truths in front of everyone? Embarrassing truths? Ryan interrupted. His voice shook with anger. It's certainly embarrassing that your family abandoned your sister, but my friendship with Margaret is nothing to be ashamed of. Margaret stood between them. This is not the time to blame each other. Ryan, you shouldn't cancel the wedding over our personal issues. This is your and Vanessa's day. But what they did. I know it's unforgivable, Margaret cut him off. But there must be another solution. Silence spread through the room. Vanessa stood by the window, looking outside. Her shoulders trembled slightly. Vanessa, Margaret called gently. Would you tell me the truth? Why does our family try so hard to keep me away? Is it just a matter of social appearances? Vanessa slowly turned around. Her face showed a vulnerability that Margaret hadn't seen in years. Do you really want to know? Her voice was small. I do. Vanessa took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Jake's accident. Margaret's body tensed. It always did when Jake's name came up. His death was an event that had forever changed her life. What about it? The truth is. Vanessa's voice trembled. The car Jake was in, it belonged to my friend. Margaret gasped. What are you saying? It was my college friend Amanda's car. She was driving drunk. And Jake. Vanessa's words broke off, and she began to cry. Amanda's brother and Jake were friends, and she had promised to take them to a movie that day. But Amanda had drunk too much at a party the night before. Margaret nearly collapsed into a chair. Ryan supported her. Did the police know about the drunk driving? Margaret's voice trembled. No. Amanda's father is an influential lawyer in this town, and he handled the evidence. It was treated as just an unfortunate accident. And you knew, Margaret's voice was cold. You knew for 4 years. Vanessa nodded. She was now sobbing. Mother knew too. I confessed to her. But she said, stay quiet for the family's reputation. Amanda's father is Mother's favorite society friend. Ryan's face reddened with anger. This is criminal. Evidence tampering and obstruction of justice. I know. Vanessa cried out. I suffer with it every day. Every time I see Margaret living without knowing the truth about losing her son. The room fell silent again. Margaret walked to the window and gazed at her reflection in the glass. Various emotions swirled in her heart: anger, sadness, the pain of betrayal. But strongest of all was a strange sense of release, that suddenly everything made sense. So that's why you all kept me at a distance, she said slowly. Out of guilt. At first, yes, Vanessa quietly admitted. But as time passed, your presence reminded us of our sin. Especially for Mother. Margaret slowly turned around. Her eyes were clear. Vanessa, I can't say I forgive you. At least not today. This is not a day for forgiveness. It's a day to learn the truth. She turned to Ryan. You should continue with the wedding. What are you saying? Ryan looked incredulous. After learning these facts, still. Ryan, Margaret placed her hand on his arm. You love Vanessa. And she loves you. Her sin is grave. But that doesn't determine your future together. But I'm not finished, Margaret said quietly but forcefully. I have conditions. She turned to Vanessa. Vanessa, after the wedding, you will meet with Amanda and her father and persuade them to tell the truth. And you will tell me all the details. I have the right to know what kind of end Jake met. Vanessa nodded, trembling. I promise. And Ryan, Margaret turned back to him. I want you to make sure Vanessa keeps her promise. Consider it a token of your friendship to me. Ryan was silent for a while but eventually nodded. All right. I will. Margaret looked out the window. The day was beginning to wane, and beautiful sunset light was streaming into the venue's garden. Now you two will return to the venue and continue the wedding. I will quietly exit. No, Vanessa suddenly said. I won't let that happen. You, stay. She stumbled over her words. As family. Margaret stared at her sister for a moment. Her eyes held determination and a faint light of hope. Then there's one thing I want you to promise, Margaret said quietly. Anything, Vanessa answered immediately. Promise to accept the truth and take responsibility. For Jake's sake, and for our family. Vanessa looked straight into her sister's eyes and nodded deeply. I promise. No more lies. And I'll take responsibility. Margaret smiled for the first time in its true sense. Then, sister, let's prepare to walk you down the aisle. Ryan watched the two sisters, slowly nodding. Complex emotions showed in his eyes, but there was also a shade of respect. Margaret, he said quietly. You truly are an amazing person. It's too early to thank me, she laughed softly. The journey of truth is just beginning. The three prepared to leave the room. As she placed her hand on the door, Margaret paused for a moment and spoke inwardly to her son's memory. Watch me, Jake. Mom has become strong. For you. 1 year later, spring sunlight streamed into the pages past a bookstore in Maplewood. More people than usual had gathered inside, with warm laughter and conversation filling the air. On the central table sat a small sign reading, Jake Reed Memorial Scholarship, and a cake decorated with blue ribbons. Thank you all for coming, Margaret smiled at the gathered crowd. Today is a special day. It's both the introduction of my nephew, Elliot Foster, and the first awarding ceremony of the Jake Reed Memorial Scholarship. Next to her stood Vanessa and Ryan, holding a small baby. Vanessa's face had softened since a year ago, and her eyes held a new kindness. This past year, many things have changed, Vanessa said quietly. I've learned to face my mistakes and take responsibility. We were able to establish a fund for traffic accident victims and start a scholarship in Jake's name because of my sister Margaret's courage and strength. In the corner of the room, Thomas Reed stood quietly. He looked older than a year ago, but his posture showed a new humility. After the family secret was revealed, he had separated from Karen and began visiting Margaret's bookstore multiple times to apologize. Today, too, he was quietly waiting to take pictures of his grandson. Karen was absent. She still refused to acknowledge her mistakes and continued to use the phrase, family disgrace, in society, but no one listened to her words anymore. And today, we have a special announcement. Ryan stepped forward and said, "We will be opening a new children's library next to Margaret's bookstore. It will be called Jake's Stars." Warm applause erupted from the venue. Margaret's eyes filled with tears of emotion. She realized how unimaginably different her life was from a year ago. After the ceremony, as people began to leave in small groups, Margaret sat in a small reading space at the back of the bookstore. A reading club for Jake's friends had begun meeting there regularly. Today, too, several children gathered around her, looking forward to the next book. "What book will you read to us today?" a little girl asked. Margaret smiled and took "The Boy Who Counted Stars" from the shelf. "This is a very special book." Vanessa approached with baby Elliot in her arms. "May I listen too?" Margaret nodded and made room for her sister and nephew. She slowly opened the book and began to read. "Long ago, when the stars were close, there was a boy." The children's eyes sparkled, and Elliot reached out his tiny hand to touch the pages of the book. As Margaret gently held that small hand, she felt grateful for the new family she had found, bonds formed not by blood, but by honesty and love. The sunset streaming through the window reflected off her ring, creating a small rainbow. It was like a sign from Jake, who must be watching from somewhere.